There are moments on live television that no producer planned, no writer scripted, and no host could have prepared for if you had given them a week of warning. Moments that arrive without knocking, in the middle of something completely ordinary, and turn the room into something nobody in it will ever forget. This is one of those moments. It involves a game show, a studio audience, a woman named Renee who came to play Family Feud with everything she had, and a door that opened at exactly the wrong moment and showed her exactly what she needed to see. It is a story about the kind of shock that sits down in your chest before your brain has caught up with it. It is a story about grace under circumstances that would break most people's composure immediately and completely. And it is a story about Steve Harvey, about the specific human being underneath the suit and the microphone, who saw something unfold in real time that had nothing to do with any game and decided without hesitating that the game was going to wait. If you have ever had the floor pulled out from under you in public, if you have ever had to hold yourself together when every instinct said fall apart, this story is going to reach you somewhere real. Like this video and subscribe right now before we go any further, because this community exists for exactly these kinds of stories, and we bring one every single week. Now let us talk about what happened. Renee Morrison was 38 years old when she walked onto the Family Feud stage in the summer of 2024. She was from Nashville, Tennessee, and she had the warm, unhurried energy of someone who has put a lot of years into building a life she feels genuinely good about. She was a kindergarten teacher, had been for 11 years, and if you know anything about kindergarten teachers, you know something important about Renee already. You know she was patient in the real way, not the performance of patience but the actual thing, built through years of sitting at small tables with small people and meeting them exactly where they were. You know she was observant in the way that people become observant when their job requires them to notice the child who has not eaten, or the child whose shoes are too small, or the child who is smiling but whose eyes are doing something different. You know she was the kind of person people leaned on, not because she never had anything of her own going on, but because she had the disposition of someone who shows up fully when someone needs her, and does not require a lot of fanfare for doing it. She had been married for 6 years to a man named David. They had met at a church cookout, the kind of origin story that sounds too wholesome to be real but sometimes is, and had gotten married 2 years later in a ceremony that her students' parents said was the most genuinely joyful wedding they had ever attended. David worked in sales for a construction materials company. He traveled for work sometimes, which had been an adjustment, but they had built rhythms around it. They had a daughter named Amara who was 4 years old and who, by all available evidence, had inherited her mother's patience and her father's ability to talk to anyone in any room within 30 seconds of arriving. They had a house with a garden that Renee tended on weekends. They had Sunday dinners with her family. They had, by the account of everyone who knew them, what most people would call a good life. The Family Feud team included Renee's mother, Sandra, who was 61, and had the specific energy of a woman who has raised children through enough to know that almost nothing is actually a crisis, and who was going to enjoy every second of this television experience regardless of what happened. Her younger sister, Brianna, 33, who was a graphic designer, and who had the quick, lateral thinking of someone who makes a living finding unexpected solutions to visual problems. Her cousin Damon, 40, who had been the funniest person at every family gathering for as long as anyone could remember, and who had been preparing for this specific appearance, by his own account, since he first watched Family Feud at age 11. And Renee's closest friend from college, Yolanda, 38, who had been her roommate for 3 years at Tennessee State, and who knew things about Renee that families sometimes do not, which is to say the full version of her, the strengths and the soft spots and the specific ways she held herself together when things were hard. David was in the audience. This was the plan. He had taken a day off work to come watch. He had texted Renee that morning to say he was proud of her. He had sent a photo of Amara in her school outfit with a note that said their daughter had told her teacher that her mom was going to be on television today and that her mom was going to win because moms always win. Renee had screenshotted that message and looked at it twice before they called the families to the stage. She was nervous in the specific way people are nervous when something is genuinely exciting rather than genuinely frightening. And there is a difference between those two kinds of nerves that shows up in how a person holds their body, and Renee's body was holding excitement. The game began. The Morrison family, which is what the production team was calling them, using Renee's last name as the team name, went up against a family from Knoxville, strong and fast and clearly well prepared. The first round was close. The audience was engaged and loud. Steve Harvey was doing what Steve Harvey does, which is make everyone in the room feel like they are somewhere they want to be. Renee was good, quicker than she probably expected herself to be, her instincts sharp, the competitive part of her personality that kindergarten teachers have but rarely get to use fully emerging in a way that made her family laugh with recognition. Her mother Sandra was, predictably, unstoppable in her particular lane. Damon was exactly what the room needed every time the energy needed lifting. They won the first round. The audience responded. Renee hugged her sister and laughed the big, unguarded laugh of someone who is having the time of their life. And then during the setup for the second round, during that brief window when the production team is making adjustments and the cameras are technically still rolling but the formal action has paused, the door at the back of the studio opened. It was a standard door. The kind studios have for late arrivals for people who need to come in after taping has started. It opened quietly the way it was designed to, and through it walked David Morrison, Renee's husband. The man who had texted her that morning to say he was proud of her. He was not alone. Beside him, close beside him, in the particular way of two people who are comfortable in each other's physical space in a way that has a specific meaning, was a woman that Renee did not recognize. They were talking to each other as they came through the door. They were not looking at the stage. They were looking at each other in the low-lit back area of the studio, and they were smiling the specific smile of two people who are sharing something private. Yolanda saw it first. She was standing at the end of the podium closest to the back of the room, and she had the angle that the others did not. For exactly 2 seconds she was completely still. Then she looked at Renee. And Renee, who had been half listening to something Steve Harvey was saying to the other team, caught Yolanda's look with the peripheral awareness of someone who has known another person long enough to read their face across a room. Renee turned. She saw David. She saw the woman. She saw the way they were standing together. She saw the smile. She saw it all in the span of about 4 seconds, which is both a very short time and, in certain circumstances, more than enough time for a person's entire internal landscape to shift in a way that will take a very long time to fully process. She did not make a sound. She turned back to face the front of the stage. She looked at Steve Harvey. She put both hands on the podium in front of her. Her knuckles, for just a moment, went pale from the pressure. And then she breathed, deliberately, visibly, the breath of someone who is making a decision about what they are going to do with the next 60 seconds of their life. Steve Harvey had not seen the door. He had not seen David come in. He was mid-interaction with the other family when whatever instinct it is that makes him so remarkable at his job made him turn toward the Morrison podium and stop. He looked at Renee. Something in her face, the specific, careful blankness of someone holding something enormous at arm's length, made him stop completely. He looked at Yolanda, who was looking at the floor. He looked at Brianna, whose jaw was set in a way that communicated something very clearly to anyone paying attention. He looked back at Renee. "Hold on," Steve said, not to anyone specifically. "Just hold on." The production team, reading the room, went still. He walked to the Morrison podium. He stood in front of Renee, close enough that when he spoke it was more to her than to the room, though everything on that stage goes everywhere. He looked at her carefully for a moment. Then he said quietly, "You okay?" Renee looked at him. Her eyes were completely dry. Her expression was the most controlled thing in the room. "I'm fine," she said. "You sure?" She held his gaze for one beat. Then something in her face shifted, not a collapse, not a breakdown, something much smaller and much more honest than either of those things. "No," she said, "I'm really not." Steve Harvey did not look away from her. He did not look toward the audience. He did not check with the production team. He just looked at Renee Morrison and said, with a gentleness that had nothing to do with his television persona and everything to do with who he actually is, "Then we're not doing anything until you are. Take whatever time you need." Yolanda, who could no longer be still about it, leaned in and said something quietly to Renee. Sandra, the mother, who had not seen what had happened but had read the room with the accuracy of a woman who has been reading rooms her entire adult life, moved to stand beside her daughter without asking what was going on or needing an explanation. Brianna put her hand on Renee's back. Damon, who had also not seen the door but who understood from the energy of the room that something real had happened, simply moved closer. Renee looked at her family around her. She breathed again. Then she looked out at the audience, which had gone quiet in the way of people who feel they are witnessing something private and are holding as still as possible out of a kind of instinctive respect. And then she looked at Steve Harvey. "My husband just walked in," she said in a voice that was steady in a way that must have cost her significantly. "With someone." The audience did not gasp. The room was too still for that. There was a sound that was less than a gasp and more than silence, the sound of 200 people receiving information that they understand immediately and completely and do not know yet what to do with. Steve Harvey also received it. His expression did not change dramatically, but something behind it did. He looked toward the back of the studio, then back at Renee. He made a decision. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and you don't have to answer it any way except honestly. Do you want to keep playing?" Renee looked at him. Something moved across her face, something that started as uncertainty and ended very quickly as something harder and more decisive. She looked at her mother. She looked at Yolanda. She looked at Damon, who was watching her with the focused expression of a person who is entirely ready to follow her lead wherever it goes. And she said, in a voice that got clearer and steadier with each word, "Yes, I do." Steve Harvey nodded once. He straightened. He looked out at the audience and said, in a tone that required no further explanation, "Then let's play." The Morrison family played the rest of that game with the specific, concentrated energy of people who have just been handed a reason that goes beyond winning a game show. Renee was no longer playing with nervous excitement. She was playing with something quieter and harder than that, the focused intention of a woman who has decided that whatever is happening behind her in the audience is not going to take anything from her in front of it. She was precise. She was fast. She gave answers that hit and moved immediately to the next thing without lingering. Her family surrounded her the way families surround each other when the circle tightens, with the particular coordinated attentiveness of people who have decided, collectively, and without needing to say it out loud, that they are here and they are not going anywhere, and she is not doing this alone. They won. Not just the main game, they went on to fast money. Sandra went first and scored 127 points. Renee went second, and the way she stood at that podium, back straight, jaw set, eyes focused with a clarity that had nothing to do with game strategy and everything to do with the decision she had made about what this moment was going to mean, was one of the most quietly powerful things the studio audience had seen all season. She answered 5 questions in 20 seconds with the precision of someone who has been running a kindergarten classroom for 11 years and has learned to make good decisions quickly when everything around her is in motion. Her answers hit. 3 number 1s, 2 number 2s. Final total, 312 points. The Morrison family had won $20,000. The audience responded in the way audiences respond when they have been watching something that was both a game and not a game at all, with the full body release of people who have been holding their collective breath and are now exhaling all of it at once. Steve Harvey walked to Renee and handed her the check. He held it with her for a moment, both of them holding it, and he looked at her with the expression of a person who has said everything he has to say and is now simply being a witness to something. "You know what just happened?" he said. Renee looked at the check, then at him. Then unexpectedly she laughed, not the performance of laughter, the real kind, the kind that arrives from somewhere you did not plan. "I won," she said. "That's what just happened." "That's what just happened," Steve said. In the back of the studio, David Morrison had been identified by a production team member during the fast money round and escorted, quietly and without incident, from the building. He had apparently only then realized that he had walked into a studio where his wife was being filmed for national television. The woman with him, whose identity Renee chose, very deliberately, never to confirm or discuss publicly, left with him. This information did not reach Renee until after the taping concluded, and she was with her family in the green room, still holding the check, still holding herself together with the careful grip of someone who knows the full weight of what they are carrying, and has decided that this specific room and this specific hour are not where she is going to set it down. What happened in that green room, with her mother and her sister and her cousin and her best friend around her, is not something the cameras recorded, and not something Renee has ever detailed publicly. Some things belong to the people in the room. What she has said, in the interviews she gave in the weeks following the episode's airing, is that her family did not let her be alone for a single moment of that afternoon and evening. That Sandra, her mother, said one sentence that she returned to many times in the months that followed, that what came in through that door was something she did not ask for, but what she chose to do after it walked in, that was hers. That belonged to her. Nobody could take that back. Renee said that she held on to that sentence the way you hold on to something in a current. The episode aired 2 months later. The production team had handled the footage with care. The moment at the podium was included. Renee's words were included, but nothing that identified David specifically or the woman with him was shown or named. What aired was Renee standing at a podium and saying, clearly and without embellishment, "My husband just walked in with someone," and then asked if she wanted to keep playing, saying, "Yes," and then playing, and then winning. The clip spread within hours of the broadcast. Not because it was dramatic in the loud, manufactured way that things go viral, but because it was true in a way that reached people who had experienced their own versions of the floor disappearing beneath them in public, and had found it in themselves to keep standing anyway. Women who had been through betrayal shared it with each other. People who had been through any kind of public humiliation that required them to hold themselves together in real time sent it to their friends. Renee's name became, for a period, shorthand in online spaces for a specific kind of composed strength, the kind that does not announce itself, does not perform, does not ask the room to acknowledge it, the kind that just keeps moving. Steve Harvey was asked about the moment in an interview several weeks after the episode aired. He said that what had struck him most was not the circumstance, which was, objectively, extraordinary, but Renee's face in the seconds between seeing what she saw and making the decision she made. He said there was a moment in there, a very small one, where you could see the full weight of it land on her, and then you could see her choose. He said he had been in that business for a long time and had watched people respond to unexpected things in front of cameras more times than he could count. He said he had never seen someone absorb that particular kind of news in that particular kind of public setting and make the choice she made that quickly. He said he did not know what it cost her to make it. He knew it cost something. He said it was one of the most impressive things he had ever seen a person do on that stage, and he was aware that saying that was a strange thing to say about a moment on a game show, but he meant it completely. Renee gave herself 6 months before she talked to anyone outside her immediate circle about the marriage, about what the aftermath looked like, about the process of making decisions about her life when the life you had built has a fracture running through the middle of it. She got through those 6 months the same way she had gotten through the taping, by focusing on what was directly in front of her, by letting her family be close, by not asking herself to process more than she could actually carry on any given day. She told one interviewer that she had learned something on that stage that she had not expected to learn and that she was still, even months later, working out the full meaning of, that she was more than the relationship she was in, that the things she was made of, the patience, the steadiness, the capacity to be present for other people, the ability to make good decisions under pressure, none of those had anything to do with David. They were hers. They had always been hers. The floor had gone out from under her in front of 200 people, and she had not fallen. And whatever happened next, she knew something about herself now that she had not known quite so clearly before. Her daughter Amara, 4 years old, watched the episode with her grandmother Sandra on the evening it aired. She sat on the couch beside her grandmother and watched her mother stand at the podium and answer the questions and win the game. And when the check appeared on the screen, she stood up on the couch and shouted exactly what she had told her teacher she would say. "Moms always win." Sandra held her granddaughter and let her shout it and did not correct anything she said, because there are moments when a child tells a truth so cleanly that the only right thing to do is let it stand. Renee used the prize money to take Amara to Disney World, something she had been promising for 2 years, and that life had kept rerouting around. They went in the fall. Renee sent one photograph from the trip to a small group of friends and family. It showed the two of them on a ride, Amara with her arms up and her face entirely made of joy, Renee beside her laughing in the big, unguarded way she had laughed on the Family Feud stage when her family won the first round, and she was just a woman having the time of her life. She was not holding anything at arm's length in that photograph. She was not managing anything or composing anything or deciding what the moment was going to mean. She was just there with her daughter, laughing in a photograph that said everything worth saying about where she had gotten herself to. That is what this story is about. Not the husband, not the other woman, not the drama of the door opening at the worst possible time. Those are the circumstances. The story is about what Renee did with the circumstances, in real time in public, with every reason in the world to fall apart, and with a game show host who was decent enough to stop and look at her and give her the space to choose. She chose. She played. She won. She went to Disney World with her daughter in the fall. She figured the rest of it out in the way that people figure things out when they have good family around them and know, somewhere in themselves, what they are made of. Some things arrive without warning and without your permission and change the shape of your life before you have had a chance to consent to the change. That is true. And it is also true that what you do in the moment after the thing arrives, that moment when the choice is real and the room is watching and your hands are on the podium and your knuckles have gone pale, that moment is yours. Nobody else's. Entirely and completely yours. Renee Morrison had 4 seconds between seeing the door open and deciding what she was going to do next. She used them well. She's going to be okay. She was probably always going to be okay. She just knows it more clearly now. If this story reached you, if some part of it connected to something you have carried or are still carrying or gave to someone you care about, share it today. Send it to someone who needs to be reminded that choosing to keep going is its own kind of winning, even when the circumstances are telling you to stop. Leave a comment below and let us know what part of Renee's story stayed with you, because this community reads those comments and they matter, and so do you. And if you are not already here with us, hit subscribe right now, because every single week we come back with stories like this one. Stories about real people in real moments making real choices. The choices that do not always look like much from the outside, but that cost everything on the inside, and that, when you hold them up to the light, turn out to be the most important things any of us ever do. We will see you in the next one.